Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And we've got so much big breaking news to cover today, including a major story surrounding a January 6th prosecution that's being ignored by the rest of the media. The story sounds like something out of a spy novel, and Revolver News founder Darren Beattie will join us in just moments to explain it all. And later in the show, we sit down with Public Square CEO Michael Seifert to talk about the importance of defeating woke capital and how you can make sure your shopping supports your values. Also, Army veteran John Rourke will join us from Blue Line Moving to talk about his cleanup efforts at the southern border. But first, the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, continues to rack up one 2024 endorsement after another, including 9 members of Congress in Florida alone. Okay, that's crushing it in DeSantis's home state. So far, there are 46 Trump endorsements in the House, 9 in the Senate, and the list is growing by the second. Endorsements are growing, donations are surging, and the polls are widening with Trump dominating at the top. And while Florida Governor Ron DeSantis continues to court some of these same top lawmakers, more and more are going all in on America First and Donald Trump. For example, Texas Congressman Lance Gooden endorsed President Trump on Tuesday right after a meeting with DeSantis. Gooden said in a statement, quote, "I met with Governor DeSantis, and while he has done commendable work in Florida, there is no doubt in my mind that President Trump is the only leader who can save America from the leftist onslaught we are currently facing." Now remember, there's no Trump policies, no America First, and no Trump agenda without Donald Trump. You got that memo, right? And all of this major momentum comes as Donald Trump continues to focus on real policy with a detailed plan to right all of the left's wrongs. For example, this week, President Trump laid out his plan to combat homelessness, to end tent cities, and ensure that law-abiding residents aren't forced to suffer under the chaos of crime plaguing our cities. Take a look.
Nothing compassionate about letting these individuals live in filth and squalor rather than getting them the help that they need. We need professionals to help them. For a small fraction of what we spend upon Ukraine, we could take care of every homeless veteran in America. Our veterans are being treated horribly. Likewise, with all of the money we will save by ending mass unskilled migration, we will have a huge dividend to address this crisis in our own country. Under my strategy, working with states, we will ban urban camping wherever possible.
Restoring order, promoting prosperity, and upholding equal justice is all at the center of the Trump agenda. And speaking of equal justice, we now turn to a pair of big breaking news stories putting the two-tiered system of justice in full view. As Revolver News is out with a huge investigative report surrounding the January 6th prosecution of a Green Beret veteran named Jeremy Brown. On the surface, Brown's case looks bad. He was recently sentenced to over 7 years in prison for possession of unregistered firearms, possession of unregistered explosives, and retention of classified information, all of which authorities said they found during a raid in his home. But how did Brown, who has been charged with 2 misdemeanors relating to trespassing on January 6th, end up with his home raided and end up in jail on totally unrelated charges? Beneath the surface, there is evidence of political retaliation, allegations of planting evidence, a mysterious audio recording appearing to show federal agents trying to recruit him as an informant, and so much more. It's a story full of twists and turns, and it is a plot fit for a spy novel. And it all raises more concerns about weaponized justice in this country, and we have more on that in just moments. But meanwhile, we've also been learning about a whistleblower inside the IRS who says that he has information showing that the Biden administration is mishandling the Hunter Biden investigation. Now remember, Hunter has been under investigation since 2018, but no charges have ever been filed despite a mountain of evidence of illegal foreign lobbying, tax violations, and foreign corrupt practices. And the whistleblower lawyer says his client is prepared to come before Congress to reveal how the investigation is being marred by special treatment. Watch.
Come forward to Congress. He's ready to be questioned about what he knows and what he experienced under the proper legal protections.
Attorney Mark Lytle's client is a supervisory special agent at the IRS who's prepared to tell Congress the investigation he's been working on has been hampered by what he thinks is special treatment.
Typical steps that a law enforcement investigator would take were compromised because of political considerations.
And here to get into all the details of his new report, Revolver News founder Darren Beattie. Darren, thank you so much. Welcome for being on the show. I really loved when you were on with Don Jr. And the viewers were like, we want more of him. I said, absolutely, so do I. So this is a story that Revolver News broke. And tell us how this kind of came into play, how you guys were able to get this information, which is like you're doing the job that mainstream media is supposed to be doing.
Right. No, well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And you're right. This is a critically important story, not just for the details pertaining to this persecuted individual, Jeremy Brown, but for the larger issues surrounding January 6th and larger still, the recent and dangerous trend of political weaponization of the Justice Department. And so I think we should begin at the beginning. Jeremy Brown, Green Beret, American hero, served his country in a variety of contexts on the battlefield and otherwise. Early December of 2020, JTTF agents approach him. They say, remember, early December, JTTF agents approach him and say, you know what, we think there's something big going down in January. And due to your status as a Green Beret and you're connected, and we'd like you to become an informant for us, because he had some association with the Oath Keepers. So that already is bizarre. Nobody was talking about something big going down in January and early December. How did they know something was up? Well, they tried to recruit him as an informant. He basically said thanks, but no thanks. And that was the end of it for them.
Yeah, because he didn't want to work for them.
He didn't want to work for them. So then January 6th happened. And, even early on, anyone looking at January 6th knew that the official story simply didn't add up. And as early as March, which was months before Revolver News ran its classic story regarding federal involvement in January 6th, in March, Jeremy Brown said, look, this doesn't add up. I'm going to have to serve my country once again and go public with what I know. He recorded the agent's attempt to recruit him as an informant. He went public with the recording, along with his theory that there was extensive federal infiltration, and that's a major component of the story of January 6th that the media wasn't telling us. Well, then his life changed dramatically. If there's anything that the government doesn't like, it's people whistleblowing and exposing their agenda. And if anyone has any doubts for this, just ask Julian Assange, or there's a long list of whistleblowers who didn't turn out so well for them. And so here's where the prosecutorial misconduct comes into play. They wanted to retaliate, but as of that moment, they just had a misdemeanor trespassing charge against Jeremy Brown. And here's where it starts to get interesting in a different way. January 6th, the whole area around the Capitol was like a large booby trap. Yeah. Why do I say that? I say that because in probably what is Revolver News' most classic and impactful piece that's transformed the entire national conversation on January 6th, we show video of suspicious actors around the Capitol while Trump was still speaking, methodically, professionally removing the fencing that indicated that was a restricted area. Ordinarily, it's not restricted. So this fencing was removed, and so after Trump's speech, when the crowd went over to the Capitol, they were walking right into restricted territory without even knowing it.
Without any, because they took down, what delineated the area.
So there are hundreds, if not probably thousands upon thousands of people who, technically speaking, committed some misdemeanor trespassing offense. Now, even in the Justice
But
Department.
it's an entrapment,
Right.
essentially, because they lured him into that area, removed the fencing, so people went where they thought they were legally able to go.
Exactly. And even in the Justice Department's vigorous attempt to go after anyone, no matter how trivially, for January 6th, not everybody who trespassed was prosecuted. In fact, very few people were prosecuted simply for trespassing. If they go after you for trespassing, that means you irritated them in some other fashion. And there was this other guy who was a whistleblower that was covered on Tucker Carlson's case, Mark Ibrahim, who was charged with trespassing, and a handful of others. But they only had a misdemeanors, and there's only so much you can do with that. And so what they did was they cooked up this domestic terrorism investigation, and they linked weapons charges to his participation in January 6th in order to justify a search warrant that ordinarily would have been prohibited for their jurisdiction. So they created these phantom charges in order to amplify the misdemeanor into something that they could search him for. And then all of a sudden they search him and they find this stuff that, they found a grenade. It didn't have his fingerprints, his DNA on it. It actually had some other DNA on it. They didn't end up testing it. But for now, the important thing to know is they created phantom charges to enable a search. And it was the stuff that they found and possibly planted in the search that they ultimately charged him for, not anything related to January 6th. So it was this kind of weird bait and switch kind of thing.
Yeah, a manufactured case, essentially.
A manufactured case, not entirely dissimilar to the gymnastics in which they engaged to indict President Trump. There's a misdemeanor document charge, but they had to create these phantom charges pertaining to campaign finance misconduct in order to change the charge into a felony. The similar type of gymnastics, albeit a very different circumstance and different case. And so I'd say of all the things here, the most egregious and scandalous aspect is Brown maintained that the grenade and the CD-ROM with alleged classified material, which he was found not guilty of that, who was found guilty of the grenade, he maintained they planted it. And he said their motivation for planting this was to retaliate against me for not only saying no to the recruitment attempt, but to exposing them and humiliating them publicly.
Right.
The judge amazingly said, the fact that you were a proposition for this recruitment, the fact that you recorded it, the fact that you released it to the public is immaterial to any motivation for retaliation, and he excluded it from the trial. He said, this trial isn't about January 6th. This is about the stuff you had, even though, as we just talked about, the only reason they were able to search was they attached phantom charges to the trespassing one. The judge said, this is not relevant to the motive of retaliation. They excluded it from trial, even when, and this part shocked me more than anything else, one of the two agents that he recorded turned out to be one of the agents who ultimately arrested him.
I mean, how improper. They're not even trying to hide it.
Right. So, I mean, it really is something incredible. It's very sad for Brown, who's kind of bravely withstood all of these slings and arrows. And he, is very, I've talked to him quite extensively, and he says, look, my only goal here is to serve the country by telling people the truth. They're begging me to, settle the case, just, shut up, and he wouldn't, and he's facing over 7 years in prison on account of this. But it opens up.
But he's appealing it.
Yeah, he's gonna appeal, and I hope that's successful. But it's a rough deal for a whistleblower. It's a rough deal. This gives us a sense of, why aren't more people coming forward? Well, when you come forward, this type of stuff happens to you. It also it puts to lie, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ray Epps story.
Well, talk about that, because
So Ray Epps is kind of one of the smoking guns of the January 6th Fedsurrection, I say. And with him, people say, oh no, he didn't go into the Capitol, therefore the government had no basis on which to charge him and so forth. There's a lot more to that story, but simply put, the case of Brown and how they used the trespassing charge in order to destroy him, basically, puts to lie this notion that they couldn't have done anything to Epps. And so the question is, why were they so motivated to go after Brown when they were motivated equally to ignore Epps? Why did they want to ignore Epps when you think from an optics standpoint, Epps is just as sort of much a thorn in their side as someone like Brown? Epps was a guy in camo, in a Trump hat, caught on camera early as January 5th telling people to go into the Capitol. He was there on the 6th directing people to the Capitol where the problems are. His behavior was considered so egregious. He was one of the first 20 people the FBI put on their most wanted list for January 6th. He was a very kind of public case of somebody that you would think on paper the government would want to make an example of. Not to mention that he was the head of the Arizona chapter of the Oath Keepers. And so the same kind of gymnastics that they undergo in order to punish someone like Brown, they undergo that same gymnastics in order to just not touch Epps and to excuse Epps. And to this day, Epps remains the only January 6th participant about whom the New York Times writes a puff piece, about whom Adam Kinzinger, the crybaby Kinzinger, has anything good to say, about whom the January 6th committee, has nothing bad to say. I mean, it goes on and on, not to mention that he wasn't touched, he wasn't prosecuted, anything. So the reasons
follow the
speak
logical
for themselves.
conclusion with that.
Exactly.
I mean, they're hands off, gloves off of him, and he's part of the one procuring and setting this entire thing up. So maybe someone accepted an offer while someone else did not.
I leave it to the audience to draw their own conclusions.
Exactly.
But when these cases, like the trespassing cases, where you have just everything's up to prosecutorial discretion, it really says something who they decide to bend over backwards to throw the sink at, and who they bend over backwards to defend.
And that's just looking at the specific facts and the evidence and the timeline and what has transpired. It's pretty unbelievable. Okay, so also, why do you think they waited the 9 months before they raided Brown's home?
Well, it wasn't 9 months, so he didn't go public as a whistleblower until March.
Right, okay.
So I think after that, it took them a while to figure out, what to do and have to go. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense to wait that long when it's a misdemeanor charge. There is no new evidence that came into being. So it was mainly an issue of, I think, figuring out the right pretext on the basis of which to retaliate in a manner that was more severe than what would be allowed simply by the misdemeanor charge. And they came up with this idea of, okay, domestic terror investigation, that will justify the search warrant, and then from the search...
To bootstrap it in like Trump.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want you to talk to me a little bit more about this audio recording, right, that he had, and you mentioned that one of the officers or agents was the person that he ended up arresting him,
right,
that he had recorded. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of a remarkable thing how this works. They approach him, and by the way, they said he was one of many that they were approaching that single day in Tampa alone, which by extrapolation gives you a sense of how extensive their infiltration efforts were. As early December, they knew something big was going down. Now, there's a whole separate series of questions about that, about, well, if they were scrutinizing at that level everything going on in Florida related to these militia groups, and they ended up prosecuting these people for seditious conspiracy, well, weren't they in a position to know about this so-called conspiracy in advance? And if so, why did they just let it happen and not stop it in the process?
Why did Nancy Pelosi not agree to have, more, more law enforcement there or National Guard?
So many questions like that. But it is remarkable that one of the agents who tried to recruit him, not only was one of the agents who arrested him, but he played a role in the very search warrant that, it created the occasion for the charges in the first place. And so when you think of those facts and you think of the fact that the judge excluded that whole story
and
from the trial, and the recording is it's just unbelievable. And
But to me, as a former prosecutor, that is so insane. The judge is clearly being biased, in my opinion, because
Right.
no honorable, good judge would say that doesn't have any bearing or relevance. It actually goes right to the heart of the matter
Right.
and the charges that they then came up with for him. To me, it's also exculpatory, very key for his defense, and that's why I think
Right.
if that's presented on appeal, that is improper that they excluded it.
I would have to think so. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't, speak to the legalities of it, simply from standpoint of what seems to, someone to be relevant. If he's maintaining that these things were planted, and he's, it's hard enough to establish that. It's, it's a burden of proof to say, okay, these were planted, and to not even allow major evidence, which would seem to be pretty compelling in terms of establishing a motivation for retaliation, to me is a pretty remarkable thing. I don't understand how it could be sustained. So
Yeah, it's
I
selective
hope,
malicious
yeah.
prosecution, which they should, allege in their appellate papers. But here's the
Right.
thing, and withholding of key evidence. This guy's family, he's been, put through hell.
Right.
And now facing the idea, the prospect of, going to, prison for a very long time.
Right. Well, that's the other. I mean, when they go after you, they really go after you. This guy, he wasn't granted bail. He's been in prison for years now, and the judge, this is a different judge, I think, denied bail on the basis of the fact that he had some sign in his yard kind of taunting law enforcement, and they said on the basis of that he's considered a threat, so we're going to keep him in prison throughout this entire process, which is, so even if he's ultimately ends up being convicted on these misdemeanor charges, he's already gotten that from time served. So they really just threw the books at this guy. They want to make an example of him, and that's what happened. When you go public, when you challenge the regime, whether it be in the context of this whistleblower, whether it be in the context of this other individual, again, very different case, but the broader context is similar. There was a guy who was convicted for a felony for memes mocking Hillary Clinton.
How insane is that?
Again, the same kind of gymnastics that you see, not the prosecutorial discretion, prosecutorial gymnastics, in this case, dredging up this old Ku Klux Klan act and completely reinterpreting it such as to encompass satirical speech in an election. You have that, and then of course the most prominent case of prosecutorial misconduct is what they're doing to Trump, who is probably, and not probably, without question, the greatest challenge to the corrupt elements of a system. So that's where we are. The first stage was if you challenge the system, they shut you up, they shut you down, they deplatform you. Now we're at the next stage where they charge you and they throw you in prison.
Literally. It's out of North Korea, this kind of behavior, or China,
Right.
or Russia.
But
I mean, that's what they do in these other countries.
At least Pyongyang is clean. We don't even have that in our cities.
Right. What a sad and sobering thought. I mean, fair point, by the way. I also want to talk about, Hunter Biden, but I want to touch back quickly about Trump. Alan Dershowitz, a good friend of mine, we've had him on this show. So many people that I talk to, it breaks my heart to even hear it and say it, but that, really feel like President Trump could be convicted because it's, such a weaponized system, the DA, the judge, the venue, just
Right.
like trying to get a fair trial in some of these places where they actually just go after him. And look at all the January 6th people that were also
Right.
held without bail, been locked up forever. I mean, the whole thing is insane. What happened with the QAnon, the shaman guy, and
Right.
literally Tucker showed that video. And, then all of a sudden they decide, oh, we're going to let him out early. I mean, you put someone in jail and convicted him and withheld evidence. He should sue the hell out of them.
Right.
I'm just so appalled by what I've seen is just a spiraling down of our justice system. And it really is like a two-tier justice system. And speaking of two tiers, let's go talk about good old Hunter Biden. Okay? I mean, it's unbelievable. He could probably go walk down the street and shoot someone like stone cold. And they'll be like, we saw nothing here, folks.
Well, Alec Baldwin did it.
Another good point. I mean, it's really, it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so Hunter Biden, what do you make of these latest whistleblower claims about Hunter? And do you think it's going to help, escalate or spark any meaningful probe, into the Biden family's corruption and shady dealings?
Well, it's always hard to tell with these things. My sense of the dynamic with the whole Hunter issue is that Hunter is kind of the sword that the regime is hanging over Biden's head to keep him in line. If Biden steps out of place, or if he simply reaches a threshold of senescence that even the regime can't, continue to prop him out and they need to get rid of him, Hunter will be the mechanism. He'll be the weapon they use. They don't want to use it just yet.
I totally
but
agree with you.
he's available to them should they need to take Biden off of the chessboard and run somebody else if it looks like he's dead in the water.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I don't know, do you know about this? We have a bunch of really good questions here. So it says, remember the Nashville bomber on Christmas Day 2020, just 2 weeks prior to January 6th? There's more than meets the eye to that story. Are you familiar with that one?
Only superficially familiar, so I can't really speak to it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Revolver News, because you guys have been breaking so many big stories and doing a great job with investigative journalism, which I really appreciate and admire. Tell us a little bit, how you founded it, why you did, the job you guys are doing, what your mission plan is, where you're headed.
Absolutely. So, it's an interesting endeavor here. Originally, the idea was to fill the void created by the decline of the Drudge Report. I think a lot of people, we loved Drudge, we visited, and then all of a sudden something happened. It's like, what the hell is going on?
We're like, who took it over?
With the Drudge Report, because it used to be such a valuable resource. And so I figured, well, we need something like a Drudge Report, but better and not, biased against conservatives and Trump and so forth. So that was the original idea of Revolver News, which still has the best aggregation out there. But then it developed something that's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And we started running these investigative pieces that changed the national conversation along in many different dimensions. We're a young site, not even 3 years old, but I think we played a very significant role in helping conservatives and the right come to terms with the fact that the national security state has been weaponized against them. And now, to many people, it sounds kind of commonplace, but I think that's evidence of the fact that we've really made progress in the past 3 years. To start out with, there was a kind of resistance, I think, in the psychological makeup, I think, of a lot of people on the right, that we're naturally designed to, we want to revere just and well-functioning institutions of authority. That's what conservatives want to do. We want to revere just and well-functioning institutions of authority. We want to support the police. We want to support the FBI. We want to support the military. We want to support all of these organizations,
DOJ.
ideally. And so I think there's a reason that the left has traditionally done much better kind of critique of the abuses of these institutions, because their makeup is more, they want to critique corrupt institutions of authority. That's what they tell themselves, that they miss the mark often. But we want to venerate just institutions of authority. So it was a different exercise in order to kind of update conservatives to the new reality that these institutions are not only no longer well-functioning, no longer just, but they're actively hostile to conservatives and people who really naturally want to support them. And so it's a difficult pill to swallow, but it's a running theme throughout all of our investigative work. Our first big work before January 6th was about this individual called Norm Eisen, who's he's had his fingerprints on all the anti-Trump operations. From the very beginning, one of the key lawfare hatchet men. He comes straight out of the bowels of the Democrat machine. A very unfortunately, a very effective individual, and many people hadn't heard of him. And we presented him to the public in the context of making the argument that the same people whose professional work is doing color revolutions overseas, this very same network of people were turning those methodologies inward domestically in order to subvert and sabotage Trump's presidency. And that was really our first big investigative piece. We did some COVID stuff, but then, January 6th kind of changed the whole national narrative on that. The involvement of the national security state in the whole censorship project. We've done a lot of work on that. So that's really the running theme, is the national security state has become a real bottleneck to freedom and progress and politics generally in this country. And it's something that's really important to understand, because unless we understand what's going on with this, with the national security state, unless we bring the national security state to heel, we don't really have a country, we don't have politics as people ordinarily understand it. That's the main thing. And that's why it's so encouraging to see in President Trump's recent policy statements a real deep and sophisticated understanding of this problem, especially the second time around. And I think he really understands that unless this is addressed and dealt with, which is a very high stakes and dangerous game, it's outside of the playpen in which, GOP kind of politicians are more comfortable playing in.
Right.
But unless you're willing to play that high stakes game, to play for keeps, to play for the whole thing, it's all going to be fake, and it's going to continue to get fake, and it's going to continue to get worse.
I think you bring up a great point, because people have really been enjoying and really invigorated by his policy speeches, and they are quite substantial and substantive, and they want to know what is going to be different, this next time. And I think they know that he has the wherewithal to do it. But that was incredibly valuable, the 4 years that he was in the presidency, and the persecution in the 2 years subsequent. What he's learned, what he's gone through, understanding the whole mechanism and the weaponized justice system. It's like day one, go in there and shut this down.
Right.
I mean, I don't even think he sleeps at night. He's like me, we're up all hours of the night, and he's thinking about this and ready. He's like itching to get in there to get this done.
Right.
No one wants to look down on the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ. It's got to be fixed to save this country.
Totally. And, he's really the only person in a position to do it. And you touched upon something in your monologue that I think is worth repeating, and that is this whole conception of Trumpism without Trump is a complete scam. There's no Trumpism without Trump. The movement is embodied in this individual who created and continues to lead the most powerful political movement in the country's history. You cannot disaggregate the man from the movement. Right. That's not how politics works. It's a mark.
That's what I said at the beginning of the show.
Absolutely.
These are Trump policies, America First policies. I mean, someone else can try to put on the soup, but it's not going to fit.
Right. It's a mark of pseudo-sophistication to think that it's simply a matter of having the right policies, having the right script. The politics and the movement and the energy inheres in the individual, and that's Trump. And that's why they're going after him, and
it's no coincidence, just like Jeremy Brown.
Exactly.
Very mirror. So where are you going to continue to follow that story? Obviously,
yes.
Jeremy Brown, and anything else you guys are working on? We want to know all your secrets that you know.
Well, we've got some interesting things in the works. As far as January 6th, I've always maintained there are two smoking guns. One is Ray Epps, the other one is the pipe bomb, which I talked about extensively when I was here with Don Jr. And we're continuing to pursue those two stories very aggressively. And here's another thing about the Jeremy Brown case is that the judge said, in the recording that Jeremy Brown took of these agents trying to recruit him, he said, in the recording, your conversation was very cordial, so there's no basis for retaliation there. He also said, when you went public, there's no proof that they even saw, your media appearance, which is also, of course, ridiculous. But what the judge is clearly being tendentious, but what it fails to realize is if you challenge the official narrative on January 6th, the regime comes after you like you wouldn't believe. And I've, experienced that directly as, leading a news organization that's been at the forefront of challenging and reshaping the narrative of January 6th. The regime went apoplectic when we first did this. George Soros has full-time people trying to demonetize us whenever there was a there was a time whenever we got some new ad deal. There was this one particular this very unpleasant woman who just it's like a kind of obsessive X energy where you have this new ad deal and she's like calling and emailing and like just obsessively trying to, and it's sad, but the people on the other side tend to cave because they hear terms like, conspiracy and this or that, they cave, and it's effective up to a degree, but it's really one of those things where if you touch upon certain nerves, and you see where they are based upon the reaction, if you touch upon certain nerves, the regime does everything it can to absolutely crush you. Now, thankfully, I've been lucky and resourceful, and Revolver News isn't going anywhere, thanks in large part to we have a very enthusiastic and dedicated audience who appreciates what we do and the work we put in. But it's not an easy thing. You really have to face a lot of headaches, and in my case, it's cakewalk compared to what Jeremy Brown faces, compared to what Donald Trump has to deal with, and so it's all.
They raided his house too. It's crazy.
No, it's just a question. Do you want to stay in the playpen, or do you want to play for keeps? And if you want to play for keeps, you're going to have to face the pain box. There's no way around the pain box. People, that's the other thing about Trumpism after Trump. They think, if we just had a more polite version, if we just had a nicer version or this and that, then then the regime would start going after us. Then we'd be more socially accepted. It doesn't work that way. If you're making a difference, if you're making an impact, you get the arrows, you get the daggers. That's just the way it is. There's no avoiding it. If you want to step out of the playpen, that's the game you have to be willing to play.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing a phenomenal job, so people can go check you out, and I guess you have ability for people to support Revolver News. You take donations. How does it work?
Yep. Go to revolver.news. We do take donations. You can sign up for an ad-free subscription to support us, and we'd really appreciate it. But mostly, share our stuff. Take the Revolver News Challenge. If you know someone who's still naive enough to believe the official version of January 6th, ask them to take the Revolver Challenge.
And red pill them as a revolver.
Go to the exclusive, the J6 exclusive. Send them Meet Ray Epps Part 1 and Part 2. Then say, look me in the eye and tell me that the official story is true now. You can't do it. So the number one thing you can do is read and share and promote our stuff.
I love it. Well, you guys do a fantastic job. And, you want to continue to get great investigative reporters and keep people employed and looking into these stories and really researching it all. So it's part of the process. But I love it. I love the whole way that you founded it, too.
Thank you.
As like a new judge. Well, you're doing a great job. All right, thank you so much again, Darren, for being here. And to make sure that you never miss these big breaking news stories, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, please, at Kimberly Guilfoyle, and turn on notifications. Download the Rumble app on your phone, hit the like button, and tell all of your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And I want to thank our sponsors who make this show possible. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about MyPillow 2.0. Because the best pillow got even better. You can ask Mike Lindell. He did all the research. He's got new patented technology, and that's what he did. MyPillow 2.0, equipped with a brand new temperature regulating technology. It will keep you comfortable throughout the entire night. No one likes a hot pillow, okay? And as Mike Lindell has been telling you, the patented interlocking fill allows you to adjust your pillow to your individual needs. So it's going to give you exact support you need from the bed to your head, and it's going to stay that way throughout the night, which is also super comfortable. And you can buy one, get one free with promo code Kimberly at mypillow.com, along with discounts on all your favorite MyPillow products. I mean, it's a very good deal. 2 for the price of 1. We like that, right? Just use my name, mypillow.com/Kimberly, and you can have a pillow, and then you can give one as a presents to your husband. All right, fantastic. mypillow.com/Kimberly. Now, a consistent theme of this show is the idea of the parallel economy and the importance of spotlighting businesses who are standing up for America-loving consumers all across the country. And that's exactly what the company Public Square is doing, building a marketplace where consumers can vote with their dollars and support businesses that support them. You don't have to choose between where you shop, where you eat, and what values you support. I recently sat down with Public Square CEO Michael Seifert on his success and why consumers shouldn't have to choose between what they believe and what they buy. Take a look. Michael, thank you so much for being on the program and joining us here. And I did very much enjoy your interview with Don Jr. And it just made me even more curious to continue the conversation with you and really get more information out to the folks about exactly how your story started, what Public Square is, what is the the future for this company, and let's begin with your vision. Like, how did you come up with? Because I think it's always fascinating to learn the idea, the process behind an entrepreneurial endeavor like this.
Well, first of all, Kimberly, thanks for having me here. This is great. I have a ton of admiration for entrepreneurs that start companies because they recognize there's a void in the market, even if they haven't necessarily felt the void. Meaning, I know some great entrepreneurs that don't wear skincare, and yet they started a skincare company because they represent there's a hole and they can create clean products, whatever it might be. There's another level of satisfaction when you have felt what your consumers feel and you're actually meeting a void in the market that you personally have felt. My family has felt what it feels like to be ostracized, left behind in an era of woke capital, as corporation after corporation, whether it's Starbucks voting to defund the police, whether it is Lululemon preaching to us about gender ideology, PayPal threatening to fine for misinformation. I have felt what it feels like to feel like the country's corporate environment is leaving me behind and my family with it and the next generation. And that makes me concerned. So I want to be a person that puts concern into action and tries to be solution oriented. And in the winter of 2021, we'd had enough. It was January and my wife and I were on a trip to Florida and enjoying the freedom. We're from California, and so we were escaping the communism for a few days, and it was a great, much needed break, especially in the heart of the COVID season. And we were just dreaming of what a solution could look like that would help us feel connected and empowered with our dollars, and had this idea of a digital platform, a public square, where people could come together that loved our country, loved these freedoms, loved the Constitution, and actually mobilize their dollars to supporting businesses that shared those same values. Because we believe that elections are important, the political environment's very important, but if we want to have lasting change in this country, it has to go deeper than that. We have to be able to move the money back toward we the people.
I love that.
That's
Move the
public
money.
square.
Right?
You got it.
And it's true. And you know what, an interesting thing, we always used to talk about this, as a prosecutor and investigating cases, we'd say follow the money, meaning like follow the money and see. And in this instance, it's follow the money and find out the companies, what they're doing with it, what viewpoints they have, ideology, what causes are they giving to with your hard-earned dollars. And that's why I love what Public Square is doing. It's simplifying the whole process so that we actually understand exactly who we should be supporting. It takes sort of the mystery and the mistake out of it. Because otherwise you're saying, well, I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. You've done the legwork. You've done, the research for it. And tell me what was one of the more like personally frustrating experiences kind of maybe that you had, as a consumer, to say, well, this is something that's really frustrating me. It's not right. I don't feel good about it, where I'm, going to use my dollars and this is a problem where it's going to.
Well, we'd need a 4-hour episode to cover all the times that we have been grieved by progressive corporate America in the last decade. But I'll share a few examples that sort of inspired our journey to start Public Square. First of all, we started in the heart of COVID. And if you remember during the COVID lockdown season, the government came out and started calling some businesses essential and other businesses non-essential. And what you found was the essential businesses were the ones that parroted the message of the regime. These were businesses that would agree with the government and had a special relationship with them so they could stay open. While the small business that loved the Constitution, was trying to value the freedoms of their consumers, they weren't allowed to stay open.
Right.
And that for us was one of the most egregious examples of government tyranny that I have witnessed in a long time. Anytime a government actor starts to come out and say that you're essential and you're not, based upon how much you agree with the regime, that is a recipe for disaster, as history has proven. So that was something that really kicked us off, saying, okay, we cannot go down that economic road. It only leads to bad places. Personally, we, in that same season, were excommunicated from certain businesses if we weren't willing to share our vaccine status or wear the mask or do all these different things during COVID. We have felt a personal grievance against companies like Starbucks that will fund Planned Parenthood with your coffee dollars. It's like, wait, I'm trying to get a latte. Why am I funding this progressive abortion issue? We've felt cancellation threats from our own bank. When we were starting Public Square, we were banking with Chase at the time just to get an entry-level banking account open. We have our banker that calls us and says, hey, I'm a little concerned about these conservative views that you seem to espouse.
Sure, yeah.
We're like, okay, first of all, you're a bank. You're not allowed to talk to us about this stuff. So we're out. We went on our app, we found a bank, and we started banking with them. And today we're proud to be with them. Axos Bank, they're fantastic. And we know with a blessed assurance that they will not cancel us for our views.
You know how many times that has happened?
Yeah.
Where accounts, your account's restricted. It happened to me at Chase Bank, where I had one account, and it was, and I'm not going to say the account, but the point is I hadn't had a name with it associated with an LLC. And then all of a sudden I get notification, like in the mail, like I can't get my money. I can't like get into my account. Okay. And then I ultimately had to close it, but because they, and try to get my money out, but then I couldn't do it because they wouldn't let me in. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like if you're telling me I can't bank with you guys because, viewpoints are conservative, this and that, I need to be able to get my money out.
Yeah.
And transfer it. And, that's it. And then the account went into some kind of like problem because when I finally got the money out, they said, well, you owe fees for, your monthly service charge or whatever. There's still, so it was like a bad credit thing where it's like, you owe $15, I don't know, whatever it was. But I couldn't even get in the account or call and talk to them about the account because they had already locked me out. But yet it was a deficit that was incorrectly charged to me. It was crazy town. I'm like, you guys locked me out of it. You all then locked me out of an account that you continued to charge me service accounts on fees. I was like, this is insane. How is this happening, in America? And did you really kind of forecast or tell that this was going to happen the way it did, how this spiraled so quickly?
It's been so gradual and then sudden. It's felt like for the last decade, it's been progressing to this, but the last 2 years specifically has been unlike anything I could have imagined. What I will say is that if you look at any communist or heavily authoritarian regime that's existed over the course of modern history, one thing they all have in common: the regime in power will seek to limit your economic access if you disagree with their viewpoints on political and social issues.
Wow.
And that's exactly what's happening today.
Yeah,
their goal is to cut off your access.
Right.
So if you start to speak out too much, speak too much truth, they've got that bank account that they can turn off, and they can restrict your access to it. And it doesn't matter if you still owe fees. They're just going to turn off the faucet. That's really dangerous. That's a social credit score. That's what China has today.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the United States is emulating anything even remotely similar to that is deeply concerning to us, and it's why we need an alternate system. Our goal is that we would help people unsubscribe from a corrupt system and take part in a system that's geared toward personal liberties. Like, these should be basic. So you mentioned, hey, yeah, how could this be happening in America? For me, America today does not look like the America of 20 years ago. And for the authoritarians, that was purposeful. They meant to do this. Now it's up to we the people to reclaim something beautiful about the United States. American enterprise has to include, at the very foundational level, trust and liberty. And we cannot trust these financial institutions anymore because they infringed on our liberties. And so it's our responsibility, it's our goal, it's our mission at Public Square to provide a massive network of businesses that that you can trust because they have put your personal liberties paramount. So that's our mission. We believe that in 9 months of being on the nationwide stage, we've seen a lot of success in the early days, but we're just getting started because this mountain's a big one to climb.
It really is. And, it's so funny because when I explain and talk to people, about Public Square and the whole, basis behind it, like, wow, it's genius. And at the same time, it's like, wow, it's obviously like, why did we allow and sit back as like passive, consumers, part of this woke commerce to help feed the beast being used against us?
Yeah. And that's part of the problem. We were apathetic. We abdicated our responsibility. We allowed for corporate boardrooms and chief diversity officers and ESG police to dictate how our economy works. And we, the consumers, have the power. So the problem is we have funded our own opposition. And a lot of times we do it unknowingly. We don't mean to. It's not like we often make conscious decisions of, yes, I want to go fund my opposition. The problem is we've allowed in our apathy for our economy to be taken over by these people that have sort of sneakily behind the scenes gradually and then suddenly implemented their own value systems at the heart of commerce, because they know, like you described earlier, if you want to see how decisions get made in society, look at who profits. And you can follow the money and discover a lot about how this all operates. And so for us, we ultimately want we the people to have the money, because if they can be the ones that are profiting, our economy will ultimately be geared back to the values that have made our country so special in the first place.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And, it's like, it's such a genius idea, but like I said, the idea, the concept behind it is actually almost like a simple concept.
Yes.
People, and I've seen this with entrepreneurs. Well, gosh, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think to, you've probably had that moment in your life too. You're like, why didn't I think of that idea? But now you're the guy that thought of the idea, you and your wife.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's funny because I'm not smart enough to think of a bunch of complex ideas, so I had to do one really simple, which is like, there's a bunch of companies that don't like us, and here's a list that do. It really is that simple. I don't want to worry about boiling the ocean or, creating a new constitution here. I want to go back to the basics. Let's go to what's really simple. We love our country. We love our Constitution. We love our freedoms. We have to protect the sanctity of life, the family unit. We need to make sure that we're supporting the freedoms that have ingrained in this country. And government is not our God. It did not give us our rights, so therefore it cannot take them away. Our rights are tied to something far deeper found in that Constitution. Let's bring things back to basics. Let's make it very simple. If a company is funding woke gender ideology and trying to convince you that they believe that there's 85 different genders, and by shopping at that company, you by proxy also believe that, let's find a different company.
Yeah, and don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't be used like this and manipulated. We got the corporate media, we've got these corporations, and they're helping feed this beast and this whole, woke ideology that ends up infiltrating and taking over every aspect, of our life, right?
Yep.
I think this is part of the bigger picture. I think we got to, win elections.
Yep.
Get majorities, whether it's Congress and the Senate, take back the White House, and take back our commerce, because that is what it's at. What is at the center, the epicenter of everything is, the economy and money, and what businesses stay in business, what businesses don't. We saw a recent example, right, with the SVB, bank. Talk to me a little bit about that, because it really feeds into exactly what you've been trying to educate people about.
Not only it does, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up, because not only is this woke sort of progressive ESG, DEI, progressive corporatism really detrimental to the American cultural fabric for all the reasons we've been describing thus far, it's also not lucrative. It's the opposite. It's damaging to the bottom line, because you're prioritizing things that have nothing to do with you providing a quality business or service, and that will affect your ability to conduct a healthy operational business. Great example, Silicon Valley Bank, donating $73 million out of those deposits that they now don't have access to because they over-leveraged and they spent money poorly and they took their eye off the ball. $73 million to BLM.
Wow.
So while SVB was collapsing, their bigger concern in all of this was, how can we make sure that we're still funding woke policies? So you have thousands of different business owners, entrepreneurs, employees that had trusted SVB with their finances, trusted them to steward it appropriately. And instead, they're using it to fund social progressive causes. And it led ultimately to the detriment of their bank itself. Now, there are a lot of other factors and inflationary spending and all these different things that have led to the collapse. But at the end of the day, if you have a financial institution that is more worried about making sure that everyone's pronouns are seen and funding Marxist organizations so that the founders of BLM can go buy more mansions, you are with a poorly run financial institution, and you should probably move your money. And
it's
that was the big
insane,
lesson.
but people have to. But here's the problem. You have to be able to, motivate people, because a lot of people, change is tough, depending. People are adverse to a lot of change, generally speaking. Yep. But this has to be a vehicle by which you can empower people to get engaged, to make that change, to switch banks, and the whole thing. It's a big deal.
It is.
And then shopping for a bank like that. And, Don and I had to do it, like when we were, getting home again together and to get a loan. And the number of places that literally would not. And despite us having great credit, despite us, having jobs and income and, great paperwork, It didn't matter. They literally would not give us a loan. It's crazy. And then we've had friends that work for those institutions say, we're so sorry, this is so embarrassing, we don't know what's gone on with this world. I mean, can you imagine this? Like, myself, former prosecutor, like impeccable record, all the above, like long, work history, everything. Don, the son of a former president, you would never think this would happen. Do you think that would happen to like Malia Obama if she went to go get a house?
No, they'd be giving her houses for free just so they could say we supported the Obamas.
Right.
I mean, it's just they're so blatant about their bias at this point.
It's bias, it's discrimination, it's it's persecution, it's trying to really damage the families and their ability to be in the business space or be able to get a home. I mean, it was so crazy, and I know that's happened too with Eric Trump when they were moving down here as well, and then trying to find a bank that has the courage to not be just so stepped on by woke ideology. Yep. Do you feel like there's a good number of banks out there, you mentioned yours and whatnot, that actually care to be brave enough? Because that's part of the thing too. When you go on, you're like, I'm with Public Square, etc. You're taking that chance. Your company is being, honest, having the integrity, the moral, courage and fortitude to take a stand. Mm-hmm. And how does that work? If you talk to businesses where they're like, well, we're happy to be out there, but we're also a little concerned of how it might look, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. We found that there's such strength in numbers as the movement has grown. I mean, I remember when we launched this with 150 businesses in San Diego, California, and those 150 businesses, it was amazing. Like we worked
These
so
are like
hard.
The Crusaders.
I know, it's so fun. I mean, and that original movement, I'm like, it's amazing 18 months ago that crew out of San Diego, California became this amazing ecosystem.
You should do like a little photo shoot, a group photo shoot.
Those are our Founders Club.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it was really fun. And I so admire their courage, especially in the early days, because no one knew what this would become. And they wanted to step out and say, hey, no matter where you are, no matter where you're from, your freedoms are important here. Our country is worth saving. And therefore, we want to let you know that you're welcome in our place of business. That was so admirable, especially in the small numbers. It's still admirable today, but it's a little bit easier today because we have such an extensive movement that's been built, and you're not alone. I think the big thing that we all need to know in this movement, of those of us that love our liberties and love our country and this America First agenda, we need to understand that there are way more of us than we realize. And the more that you see that, the more that
courage
builds on itself. So even the businesses on the
becomes
platform,
contagious in a way, right? It's like the whole domino effect.
Yeah, you do. You recognize that, wow, I actually can see there are those that have gone before me. There will be more after me. We have hundreds of new businesses joining the platform every day. And we're actually not the ones picking the fight. We're the ones that haven't changed. I always say to people all the time, I'm not like a controversial guy. I'm a normal guy from 2006. Like, my views are pretty much normal. I'm not extreme on any one thing. I'm a pretty normal dude that wants people to generally live with freedoms and liberties at the forefront. I want to protect life. I want to protect humanity. Like, these are things that should not be controversial. It's the 15% of the country, the blue-haired they-thems, that have made this controversial. It shouldn't be. And so when you have companies speaking to that 15%, our thesis is simple. We actually don't think that 15% represents the majority of Americans that are tired of this stuff. We're going to go talk to them. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that it almost, for a business to join today, doesn't even take a ton of courage anymore, because you see this flourishing movement. You're like, look, even if I'm not super political, I certainly do not want what that 15% is pursuing. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to join this freedom movement, and people are happier.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I love that. So you talk about that. I mean, you're such a humble, like, very nice man. Like, I know you personally, right? Besides just being the subject of a subject matter that I'm very interested in covering and learning more about. But people look at you in a really great way, like you're a folk hero, because you had the courage to do this. And no, but it's interesting that, and you're such a nice man and all of the above, but there's courage behind this. And you were able to stand up for people for something that they believe in, because it takes one person sometimes to make that difference, to change, society, or to make a huge impact. Talk about how that's felt, for you and for your wife, as a family. You're, a young father, a new father. Congratulations on that. And how that makes you feel, as a man and the head of the family.
Well, thank you. I will tell you that having a child 5 months ago, sweet little girl, having a child shifted everything for me, because everything I was doing before then was largely for this big purpose of saving the country. Like, that's
Right.
what I want to do. I genuinely believe that, like Benjamin Franklin said, those who change the world are the ones crazy enough to believe that they can.
Yeah.
It's not anything about us. It's not anything that we're doing special. It's just that I'm willing to work harder and longer than anyone else to see redemption in this country.
And you do. I can attest
thank
to that.
you. I'm trying. And a lot of Celsius is keeping me going. We're not sponsored by Celsius, but
No, we're not.
we should be. I drink a lot of it.
But we like to drink it.
Yes. And so, we're just energetic and passionate about the future of our country. I will tell you that since having a child, though, it's become very micro. Like, the reason I do what I do more than anything else is because I want to make sure that my daughter is not growing up in the country we're currently seeing today.
Right.
Things have to get better. And we're willing to put everything on the line to make sure that it does. I'm really excited to one day be on my deathbed and look back and live with no regrets. I think my greatest fear is...
That's my father's favorite saying. Is live life with no regrets.
That's what I want. I want to be able to look back and know that we had significance here. And so I will say that for us, our journey has not... When we started this idea 2 years ago in San Diego, we didn't have any big names behind it. Nobody knew us. We just were a group of people that cared enough to try to go for it. And there's nothing special about us. We just love this country and are trying to save it. And so we've got, thankfully, an amazing team around us, incredible partners in this fight.
Love it.
Like you and Don, that are just living this message every day and are genuinely expressing it. And so it's been a humble journey. We're getting humbled every day. We don't know all the answers, but we're working harder than anybody else, and we believe that ultimately will pay off.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned, and I love the quote, by Benjamin Franklin. Do you see yourself as a political figure?
Great question. I think that to claim you're not political is to actually be political. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about this a lot. So I definitely do not want to say that I'm not political, because I actually think that people saying, "Oh, no, wait, I don't want to touch politics," has been the problem, because then people are apathetic and they're not actually stepping into the public square.
And being authentic. And
yes, exactly. And so I would say that by virtue of the fact that we are standing for certain principles in the public square, yes, that's certainly political. That said, I will say, I believe that politics is downstream of culture. I believe that Andrew Breitbart was correct. I believe that ultimately
Loved him,
we will see political change when we affect cultural change. And so more than I see myself or our company as political figures, I see ourselves as cultural fighters. I want to try to see if we can get some wins.
Warriors.
Exactly. I want to get some wins on the battlefield of ideas and commerce, and believe that that'll then translate into political wins.
Fantastic. All right, yes, I'm in two different dresses. So your mind's not playing tricks on you. All right, the second part of that interview is just ahead, and later in the show, we'll cover the growing crisis at our southern border with an Army veteran on a mission to clean up the border. But first, I want to bring you a special message from Patriot Lifestyle, where you can save more and spend less on a whole host of different benefits, from non-insurance healthcare benefits to savings on travel, identity theft, legal services, and even pet care. Take a look. Kimberly Guilfoyle. We've commissioned a lifestyle benefit program for our America First Patriots, Patriot Lifestyle. This program includes identity theft protection. And as a former prosecutor, I know that identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America. You also have free and discounted legal services, roadside assistance, travel discounts, cashback rewards while shopping on the internet, and our newest service, Pet Assure. Right, Mario and Luigi? Where you receive discounts at veterinarians across the country and pet supply stores. Patriot Lifestyle covers you, your family, and your furry friends for less than $1 a day. Follow the link and please sign up to get your Patriot Lifestyle started. And that is our pups at the house. Don and I and the kids have the Super Mario Brothers, Mario and Luigi. So they made their big commercial debut. And we'll have even more to tell you about Patriot Lifestyle in the coming days and weeks. It's an extraordinary value and will improve your life. And now in the second part of my interview with Michael Seifert, we go into more detail on how corporate America is surrendering to woke capital and how Public Square is the solution to standing up for your values in the marketplace. Take a look. One of the things that, I've been asked in life, and I always find fascinating to hear from other people, is Who have you looked up to or admired, during your lifetime that you feel has had an impact on you? Whether it was someone that you loved their intellect, or you loved their vision for life, or you loved the way they approached business, or what they stood for. I don't know. Whether it's religious, political, economic, all of the above.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yes.
He's probably, if we ever have a son, I'm trying to convince my wife, let's name him Dietrich. It's not a common name these days, but I love it. I think that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a hero. There's a reason why Hitler hated him so much, and it's because he took a stand for his values in the public square. I'm a man of faith as well, and I admire anybody that's willing to take their personal convictions into the public arena and stand for them. Big fan of Teddy Roosevelt for the same reason.
Yes.
I believe that that ultimately people should be in the arena fighting for their values. I think there are a lot of American heroes. Ulysses S. Grant I look up to quite a bit. I admire people like Thomas Jefferson that went before us and were just unashamed in their values, that were very complex people, but they secured so much of the liberties today that we get to enjoy, every single one of us. And so I definitely have heroes that are American founding fathers, also thought leaders in the sort of political and faith space like Dietrich. But more tangibly, it is cliche and it might be cheesy, but like my own father. I mean, I think today so much of the problems we're experiencing in the United States is because there's an absence of healthy families. And I think that culture tries to do a lot to paint fathers as the sort of dopey dads that are just stumbling around and can't provide any guidance. My father was the opposite.
Like the show Married with Children, remember that?
Yeah, or Modern Family, or any of these shows where it's like. So I think for me, my own father has been quite an inspiration because my parents taught me well how to think, but not what to think. And I think today, in such an age of indoctrination, knowing how to reason is such a lost art. And I learned that from my own family, especially my dad. So I have a lot of heroes. I have a lot of inspiring figures in my life, and none of which are perfect, all of which have their faults. But I do too. And so trying to learn how to make the best.
Everyone does.
Yeah, and I have really cool people to look up to. And I encourage everybody watching this, find your people. Like who inspires you? I got a lot to learn, but I got a lot of really cool people to learn from.
Absolutely. I have two follow-ups from that because two things that really stood out to me. Number one, I am so incensed by the way society is trying to devalue fathers, devalue dads across this country so that they are not considered to be important in the home, are not considered to be integral and necessary for a family unit. Talk to me about that.
Well, the data doesn't lie either. If you don't have a father in the home, you see a 9x increase in jail time that you will spend in your life. You see an 8x increase in drug abuse. You see I believe it's, you have an 800% more likelihood to not graduate high school. The stats are enormous in terms of the detrimental impact a lack of a father figure has. So only one conclusion can come out of that. There's clearly, on the other side of that, a massive benefit to having fathers in the home. You are more likely to live in success when you have a father figure in the household. Culture does not want to accept that because it highlights a whole lot of principles that are just objectively true, which are that the role of a mother and father is somewhat different, and men and women are different in their giftings that they bring to a family, and that kids need different things from their moms and their dads. It also paints the direct opposition, that truth paints a direct opposition to toxic masculinity, because actually what we need in this society right now is far more masculinity. They call it toxic, I call it healthy. We need fighters, protectors, people that are standing up and willing to speak objective truth. And ultimately, we need correction. There are so many times throughout the day when I see these little kids with TikTok brain, and I just want to shake them. I'm like, guys, you just need a dad figure to come in there and be like, snap out of it.
Right.
This is just wrong. I admire Tucker Carlson a lot.
Yeah, he's
and
great.
I appreciate his stance
personal
on...
friend of Don and myself. Obviously a colleague, but a personal friend.
Yeah, and how well does he live this? He talks all the time about what it means for him to be obviously a cultural figure. More important than any of that, he's a dad.
Yeah.
I think we need more people like that see that as their primary role. And there's a reason culture attacks it so much. It's because it will lead to a healthier country. Part of the last thing I'll say here is that the reason culture attacks healthy fathers so much is because they want you to see the state as your father. They want government to be dad. They want their regime to be God. You cannot seek guidance from any sort of fatherly figure, or because it will paint them as irrelevant or unnecessary, the government. So for us, I think it's our responsibility to say, hey, a tenet of a healthy family is to have some sort of fatherly figure in there where you're able to look to and know that they can teach you right from wrong, objective truth, and how to reason.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, you see with everything going on in society, the importance of, family and having healthy role models and having a father in the home. And, we see with what's been going on with these mass shootings, and you look at the familial background of the individuals or the choices that they have made, and it's very disturbing. It really is. You also mentioned when you were talking about the people that you look up to and mentioning, Teddy Roosevelt and Ulysses Grant. And what I've also seen is in this whole culture war is devaluing role models and, destroying like history. It's no longer okay to look back historically and say, oh, well, I admire George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin or Teddy Roosevelt, and I literally saw it in New York. They were taking down the statue of Teddy Roosevelt, the Natural History Museum. So they have now entered into the public square where we keep our monuments and are tearing them down.
Yep.
How's that made you feel?
A nation that forgets its history is not really a nation anymore. Ultimately, we're a figment of whatever modern society's imagination creates if we forget how we got here. And right now, I do not want the current cultural leaders that run our institutions in Hollywood and financial sectors, I do not want those people to paint the past. I do not want them to paint our reality. So we need these objective things we can look back to as monuments and say, wait, hold on. Cut the noise. This is how we got here. We need to pay honor where honor's due. We need to pay respect where respect is due. Doesn't mean any of these people are without critic. Of course, everybody needs their critics. None of us are perfect. And yet, I think it's the most detrimental mistake a young social liberal arts graduate can make to go out into the public square to look at someone who built this nation that they are privileged enough to live in and say, I would have done it better if I were them. No, you wouldn't. I laugh at people all the time that are like, well, if I were in their position, I wouldn't have done X, whatever it might have been. It's like, you absolutely would have. You voted to strip me of any economic access during COVID if I didn't have a vaccine. You absolutely would have been a tyrant. You would not have been half as good of a people as some of these monuments portray. So my big call to the country is never tear any monuments down. Keep them up, no matter whether you like them or you don't like the figures. Sure. These people deserve respect because they built our country. And there are plenty of reasons to agree and disagree with certain people. I think our founding fathers are heroes. I think the people that have come before us are far better people than we are most times. And I think that people like George Washington, for example, are amazing examples of integrity in action because the country wanted him to be president for longer and longer and longer. And he was power with restraint. He said, it's actually not good for a man. We just left a monarchy. Let's not go back to that.
Exactly.
Where are those people today?
Where are they?
Honestly, the closest embodiment I can think of a leader in our modern era that's like that is President Trump. He didn't need this. Trump did not need to be the president. He didn't need the money that comes with the office. Sure. He didn't take a salary. He had everybody liking him before. He didn't need the division, and yet he went out there and he stood on his principles because he chose to serve. He did. He chose to serve.
Absolutely.
So I think we need more leaders and more respect for people that have gone before us, and we need a big humbling in society. If you're 19 years old and you're a gender theory major and you think that you know all the keys to society and how economic policy should be structured, you need to sit down. You need to breathe. You need to look in the mirror and realize that you do not know all the answers, and you need to look to our nation's founders and recognize that they may have something to teach you that you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about, the financial markets and what we've seen, going on, but more specifically about the impact of, you entering into this fray. And you've had to now go and, Silicon Valley and, banking and getting people to, invest and that type of thing. What has that process been like?
Well, interesting, because just like the consumer spending world needs an overhaul toward our values, so does the world of investments and capital markets. I desire for the democratization of the capital markets. I think the capital markets have largely been dominated by a few major players that all have sort of the same ideology, and therefore that leaks downstream and everyone gets tainted by it. It's the ESG, DEI crowd where these companies are promoting these value systems that are detrimental to their own bottom line over the interests of their shareholders. I think that's really destructive. So we've been inspired. We actually just recently announced a few weeks ago that to go public through a SPAC merger with a great team over at Columbia Acquisition Corp, CLBR, on the New York Stock Exchange. We announced this deal with them because we want we the people to own the company.
Right.
We the people have built it. It's been our consumer base. It's who we're building it for. Therefore, I want them to own it. I think the way that we can best establish the power being shifted back toward the hands of the people is by moving the money there, like we've talked about this episode. That doesn't just relate to consumer spending. It relates to their ability to actually own the capital markets that they create as consumers. So we're really excited for the next chapter.
Yeah, you found a very good fit, which is fantastic. But you know, that's a whole other thing in terms of being, you know, a business and being an entrepreneur and like figuring out the vehicle by which you're going to do it. I love the whole concept because it's putting back the power and, you know, with the people, giving them a chance to have ownership and have skin, you know, in the game, which I absolutely love, and being involved in that. You know, public marketplace. You know, venture capital, Silicon Valley, a lot of the people there sometimes are a little bit, you know, woke.
Yes, it's a wild world. And honestly, what I'm so grateful for is that just like we've discovered there's this entire movement of consumers that have felt alone that are ready to start speaking up and voting with their wallet, there are also a lot of investors that have said, I am tired of what I'm seeing. This company continues to abuse my funds. I mean, our family, we talk about this all the time. We used to own shares in Disney. And it's like, oh, we got to get out of that. Because look at what Disney's doing. They're promoting corrupt and perverted gender ideology over the interests of their shareholders and providing good quality, wholesome family content for kids. That's what they were supposed to do. They denied their fiduciary responsibility. They do no longer deserve our investment. What we've found, thankfully, is that there are a lot of investments and a lot of investors that have moved their money away from woke corruption and are saying, I want to see a return, not only in capital, but also in impact. I want a betterment for the future of our country. And I believe that my invested capital is the way to get there. So we have an incredible team of investors that have come together to create this company and to source it with the right capital to grow. Building an internet commerce company is not cheap.
No.
You need an amazing team. You need people that are driven to see, again, a lot of impact with their dollars. And thankfully, we found that. And I hope and pray, too, by the way, that more companies that are stepping out in this arena are willing to experience those same open doors with investors. Because there are great firms. A good friend of ours, actually the CEO and chairman at Columbia, Omid Malik, started a private fund. It's called 1789 Capital. That's built to fund America First startups. There's this revolution happening in the capital markets. It's exciting, and we feel like we're at the tip of the spear.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting. And what I also love about it is everybody can make a play. Everybody can, you know, be involved, and that you, as an individual, anybody out there can become an economic activist by just even using the site, choosing a business, you know, for whatever need that they may have, a restaurant or whatnot, and actually being like, okay, I am part of this, you know, economic activist chain, jumping back into commerce and taking back this country. With every click and choice that you make going on there.
It's that simple.
And just, or if you're someone who's a small business, etc., there is no requirement that you be a certain type, kind, or size of business, correct?
That's exactly right. We have individual sole proprietors that join the platform that sell jewelry and say, hey, I do this as a side gig, but I'd love to get this in front of this audience. They're welcome. We have major banks join us. They're welcome too. We have 5 values that businesses agree to respect when they sign up. They're not going to spend time, money, or resource antagonistically against those values. And then we've got a great vetting team that makes sure they're a legitimate business that's providing quality goods and services, and then they're welcome to the platform. We have all different industries, all driven by that same desire.
Okay, good. So let's get a little bit more into, you know, the structure of it. And you talked about the 5 values. So tell me more about that.
Absolutely. We're united in our pursuit of freedom and truth. That's what makes us Americans. We believe in protecting the sanctity of every life. Small businesses are the foundation and the backbone of this economy. We believe that ultimately government is not the source of our rights. Therefore, the government cannot take them away. And we believe that the United States is exceptional. It's worth defending and protecting. These values are fundamental to our experience as an American. They have to be in order for our economy to be saved. And therefore, when a business signs up, a new business today, they're agreeing to respect those things. And we also even ask them to take part in kind of a program that helps them move more of their manufacturing to the United States, asking them if they are willing to source or produce as many of their goods in the United States as possible, trying to bring things back to our shores. stores. It's a very cool business community that's been created all centered around these similar values. And what's neat is that some of these businesses are like, yes and amen. I mean, I just live and breathe this stuff. We have other businesses that join that say, you know what, this is the perfect articulation of what I've always thought, but I've never really talked much about this. I'm ready to jump into this marketplace to kind of dip my toes in the water. And it's great, and I agree with these things. I don't really consider myself political, but I'm all about this. And what's great too is then the consumers know that they're not funding this woke agenda because these things stand in direct opposition to it. So it's free for a business to join, it's free for a consumer to join, and we've seen that lead to immediate feelings of like, well, why wouldn't I join the community then?
Yeah, it's so cool. So I want to ask you, I mean, I'm a former prosecutor, okay? So, I'm always thinking about how, if somebody's going to be a bad guy, is they're going to be, try to get on this platform to try to scam anybody to like pretend that they're, America first and freedom loving or share the same values and protection and sanctity of life. How do you make sure that you have signed something, and do you then also go back and check and make sure that someone is, complying, that there's some kind of like, kind of quality control?
Oh yeah, we definitely do. Two ways, one of which is obviously on the sign-up process, the business agrees to respect those things, as I just mentioned, and then we've got a team that actually vets them on the back end. So a young, hungry group of people, either college graduates or still in school, doing it on the side, that are vetters. They love this country, they believe in our values, they are America first all the way, and they see this almost like a political campaign.
It's like a calling, they have a passion
it's
for
amazing.
it. Yeah.
And so they'll go and they'll vet these businesses and they'll make sure that, hey, this is a quality representation of their values, and there's not things presented that are going to infringe upon the values of the platform and certainly the values of these consumers. So we've got a great hungry team that actually verifies every profile before it goes live, which is awesome. So we have hundreds of
businesses. So there's the
that
accountability, which I love too, because the idea of like a little, sweet aunt, Peggy Sue, goes on and clicks and she wants to hire somebody, or she wants to, do banking with someone, and she's relying on that, to trust for somebody to have, the integrity to go through, check the veracity of it, make sure that they're actually doing what they say they're going to do. So they have that peace of mind and certainty that they're really doing something good by going to the site, choosing those businesses that choose their same values.
Well, and many times we have a robust group of ambassadors. We've got about 400 ambassadors around the country that are just every day going and finding new businesses and inviting them to the platform. So what's very cool too is that there's also some verification built into our ambassador network, because these ambassadors apply with us, and then when we approve the ambassadorship, they're given their own kind of custom link where they're able to go out and invite new businesses to the platform. That's great too, because they're not going to invite businesses that are antithetical to the platform. They're going to invite those of their uncle or their brother or their neighbor that they know owns that business, loves these principles in this company, and wants to grow the movement. So that's awesome too, because then, we have nearly 50,000 businesses on the platform. A lot of them came from a smaller, more intimate group of ambassadors that were able to get to know better, and that helps also. That way it's not just us behind some computers relying on a bunch of random experiences to generate this list. Instead, it's far more of an intentional community that's been built.
All right, so I want to kind of conclude with, and we're going to continue to follow your journey here, because I think it's a fascinating, American business story as well that people can learn a lot from and really enjoy kind of the process and the path by which you had to, go down to accomplish this and create this whole situation. But let's talk about your goals, for the next, year or next 5 years. Where do you see yourself, and where do you see this amazing company?
Well, I never could have dreamed 2 years ago that we'd be here today. So I hold my perception of what might be very loosely, because we've just become friends as of the recent history, and have been so blessed to get to know you and Don better. And we were talking last night about how could you have ever imagined 9 months ago when we were sitting dreaming about the future of this company that we'd be here where we are today. It's so cool to watch how things evolve. So that said, I cannot imagine for what we're going to be 5 years from now. What I will say is that we are building an economic force that should not be underestimated. I believe that already what's happened in the last 9 months has spoken to the potential of the parallel economy, and we're excited for the next steps to look like taking this company public, having we the people own this company. With this SPAC merger, we believe that we're going to be able to fund this company with growth capital. We'll take this to the next level. We are coming after some of the e-commerce giants. We are going to simplify and continue to streamline the shopping experience toward our values and quality products and services. We want the right right businesses to prosper, that love our country and love our freedoms. And you know what? We don't have to do this by saying, let's boycott the other side. We don't even have a blacklist on our app. We spend all of our time saying, here's where you should go.
Right.
So we believe that the hopeful future of what's to come and this desire to see more change is going to be a powerful enough of driver to move you away from this corrupt system and into something far better than we ever could have envisioned. And so I would say, watch out. The next few years, Public Square is going to come with a force, not because of anything special about us, but because of the people that have built this company.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that it's going to have this, it's sort of, it's very multifaceted, and the approach and focus as well on being an e-commerce site where somebody can actually go there, and you're simplifying the steps and the process so they can actually go on there, make their purchase, support people who are making products that also share their values.
Absolutely. That's part of our goal too. Understand exactly what this economy is looking for, and then able to create some of those products ourselves. So we have some fun announcements about that in the near future. But we do.
But
believe
you're relying
that
on that feedback. So it's a
are.
collaborative process with your, consumers, your users, people that visit the site. So you're getting that information in so that you can best, serve them in a full capacity, so they don't have to look it up and then go try and find it. They can get it right there.
That's exactly right.
Fantastic. Well, what a journey, and it's going to be incredible to watch and see the things that you continue. And I want to have a little space in your head right there to see what other ideas you might have coming up for the future.
I'll come back on and would love to share them, and let's keep touching base. The audience is amazing here. I mean, this is the parallel economy in action, and so I'm very excited
with Rumble,
to continue
the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic to see this. So this is just another example. What you've been able to accomplish with your incredible team, and I can say you have the best people, working with you and for you, and it's been wonderful to see how you've selected and brought people on that share the values and are super, super passionate, like some of the best and brightest in the business that made sacrifices and everything to come. And some of it's funny, they're like, well, I've been working all my life as blah blah blah, and then I'm now going to go work for what, 27?
Yeah. Yes. I gotta keep the beard, so I look at least a little older.
I think so. Hysterical. I know.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you for sharing, and this is so informative. And look forward again to following you along the way and seeing this, amazing Public Square company grow and be embraced by the people.
Thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate your time.
God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
I had so much fun with Michael Seifert. He is truly an amazing man, and this is an incredible company. We absolutely love it. And we will continue to cover Public Square and the importance of the parallel economy. But we turn now to our next story as Biden's border disaster continues to go from bad to worse. A new report says that thousands of migrants from banned Title 42 countries are still being permitted to cross into the United States despite Biden's claims of a tougher new border policy. And shelters in places like El Paso, Texas are overwhelmed. And Americans themselves are stepping up to try and help combat this border chaos since Biden has totally failed us. One Army veteran is on a mission to clean up the border and help those who are suffering. He has seen firsthand the damage, the destruction, and the suffering caused by Biden's open borders policy. It's a great pleasure to introduce my friend John Rourke. He's also the owner of a veteran and law enforcement-backed moving company, Blue Line Moving. But it shows the difference what one person can do when they put their mind to something and decide to make a difference. And he is a veteran serving in our military. We thank you for your service to this country, John. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Kimberly. Appreciate it.
Okay, so talk to us about your work at the border. I mean, how it came about that you decided, I'm going to go and do something about this, just frustration seeing what was going on.
Yeah, it's just, not seeing action being taken by the federal government, seeing these people that are American citizens just like we're American citizens, right? They deserve the same rights to this country, a clean country, a country where they feel safe in their own house. And it's just year after year, I'm tired of seeing these people on the news talking about people banging on their doors at 3 a.m, finding people sleeping in their yard. If you don't have anything nailed or screwed down, they're stealing it. So I just got tired.
Squatting in people's houses.
Oh yeah, just completely taking over towns, and and draining the food banks, draining the hospitals, draining everything. The jails are overflowing. So I decided that I was going to do something about it. And I saw a sheriff, AJ Louderback from Texas, talking about how all the trash is left behind when the illegals come through. So they come through and they're wet when they cross the Rio Grande. So they bring dry clothes in a garbage bag usually. So when they come out, they take their wet clothes off and leave them scattered all over the shoreline, really. And then they take their dry clothes on and throw the garbage bag down. So they just, after years and years, you're talking about
tons of trash and littering. Here's a picture right here. Tell us what we're looking at right now.
So this is in Eagle Pass. This is one of the worst places I've ever seen for trash being left on the border.
Insane.
I mean, this is as far as the eye can see. In some places it was knee deep. As you can see right here, we're just walking along one of the paths down there in Eagle Pass, and these people come out of the bushes, literally just crossed the Rio Grande in front of me. The child that is there is crying, and I'm asking him, what's wrong, what's wrong? I later find out that those weren't his parents, that they had just brought him across. And these are the things that the people in these towns and counties are dealing with. And these sheriff's departments are underfunded. They're rolling around with old equipment. So we raise money, and we also donate money to the sheriff's departments in every county that we do a cleanup in. We do the cleanups on 9/11. So I fly in on 9/9, 9/10, and 9/11, and we pick up trash. And I try to raise as much money as I can, and I donate that directly to the sheriff's departments because they're suffering down there. I mean, it is just not fair to these citizens to not be able to sell your house. Imagine your greatest achievement, buying a home and achieving that dream, and then knowing you'll never be able to sell it because no one ever would want to move to where you live.
How sad is that? I mean, it's so terrible. I mean, it's an issue with public safety. There's child trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, fentanyl pouring across the border, garbage all like that, and your property being devalued. It's just unbelievably disturbing and sad. Let me ask you something.
Sure.
When you saw this, you said, I'm just going to go down. Like, how hard was it for you to put this operation, together? And I think you've made 3 trips so far.
I've done 2 trips to the border to do cleanups, 2 cleanups. I've done a dog rescue also at the border where we rescued 40 dogs in Eagle Pass and Del Rio.
Big Dog Ranch Rescue.
With Big Dog Ranch Rescue. We just, when I was down there doing these cleanups, I just noticed there's so many wild animals everywhere. Like it's like a third world nation. It's almost like an island nation where there's just hundreds of dogs in every street corner and every parking lot.
Just wild running around.
Strays just everywhere.
Tons of fleas and stuff.
Covered in ticks and fleas and disease. And these are animals, and what's happening is people are bringing their animals with them. Think about this, like they'll bring their animals and they have their shot records and stuff with their animals, but they don't have anything, identification for themselves, but they know it's so easy to cross the border that they'll bring their pets with them. That's how they know the border is wide open. The Border Patrol tells them, I'm sorry, you can have your animals, and then they let the animal go. So then they're not spayed or neutered, and they just keep reproducing. So it's just a total destruction down there. And I decided that I was going to do something about it. Why not, right? I mean, this is America. It doesn't cost me anything really to walk around and pick up garbage. I mean, it's not complicated.
It's the right thing to do. And
I feel like it is.
Tell us too about your company. I mean, you moved us.
Yes.
Tons of people that we know, and the Gretzky's and a bunch of people. Blue Line Moving. It's law enforcement, veteran backed.
Yes, that's right. So Blue Line Moving. My sister's a law enforcement officer here in Palm Beach County. My dad's a retired NYPD, so I come from a long line of law enforcement. I'm retired from the Army. So this company, I used to be a mover for this company over 20 years ago. I used to move furniture for this company, and now I own the company.
How cool is that?
So it's really cool
American
to come
dream.
full circle, and it just shows you, if you, with persistence and determination and doing the right thing, that you can achieve your dream and you can make it happen. And that's just, kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to shine a light on some of the things that the government is doing, but then also be an example to veterans that are transitioning out of the service, that you too can, it doesn't always have to be about the military your whole life. You can achieve other things.
As well.
That's correct.
Fun fact, we're both the same mix.
Yeah,
So
Irish and Puerto Rican.
Irish and Puerto Rican. So
That's
there
correct.
we go. Both
Let's
had,
go.
Puerto Rican moms and Irish fathers. All right, well, we're looking forward to having you back on this show a lot,
Absolutely.
and I know we're going to do some exclusives and breaking news stuff when you go do your next trip down there to the border, and have you do some news reporting, man on the street stuff for us as well.
Look forward to it. Can't wait.
Always a pleasure. John
Thanks for having
Work.
me on.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, and this is a big breaking news alert. This just in. Charges against actor Alec Baldwin have been dropped in the fatal on-set Rust shooting. Baldwin had been charged with involuntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of his cinematographer. We're going to continue to follow that story, but it's quite shocking that those charges have been dropped, and yet they still tried to persecute President Trump. And before we go, I want to thank our amazing sponsors who make this show possible, like Goldco. Diversification is more important than ever, and gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation and dollar devaluation. You can roll over your 401k or IRA into precious metals and safeguard your savings tax and penalty free. Look, we see all the warning signs. We see an economic storm brewing, and I want you to be prepared. Do it for yourself, do it for your family. So from precious metals, IRAs, to direct purchases of gold and silver, Goldco has helped thousands of Americans diversify and protect their retirement savings. They got a great team. They'll walk you all through it, take care of everything for you. So go to kimsmetals.com to learn more. That's kimsmetals.com. So in closing tonight, now more than ever, we see the need for building your own. Today, you've heard from guests who are doing just that, building a news outlet and starting a marketplace for America-loving businesses. And of course, a veteran and law enforcement-owned business with Blue Line Moving. The parallel economy is the path forward for growing the America First movement and the path for shedding light on the woke lunacy and corruption plaguing our country. And as I've said, it's why I'm here on Rumble, where we reject the false narrative and always seek the truth. So make sure you like and subscribe to my channel at Kimberly Guilfoyle and Donald Trump Jr. on Don's channel as well. Turn on notifications, download the Rumble app, hit the like buttons on our shows if you enjoy them, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And also be sure to follow me and Don Jr. across all platforms, Twitter, Truth Social, Facebook, and on Instagram. We like to hear from you. Don Jr.'s got a big show live at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight with Ian Pryor. You are not going to want to miss it. And if you can hop over, we'll do 5 minutes on locals at kimberly.locals.com for a live Q&A. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Have a wonderful time. I'll see you on Monday, and tune in for Don Jr. at 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.